Okay. The last time we met, we looked at we were introduced to ICT strategy, and we were introduced to the module or course unit, and then we went on to understand the generic strategy, overall strategy for any organization. The recording for that lecture is up on Moodle. So if you have access to Moodle now, for those especially who didn't attend last week's lecture, the recording is there. You can go ahead and download it and just have a feel for it. But maybe just to give you just a small recap to what we did that time, especially I want to show you that last diagram so that because it gives a kind of an idea for those especially who didn't attend last week, trying to understand what strategy is. So strategy in general for any organization is looking at where we are now and then saying, where should we be as an organization? Where should we be? Is this where we should be as an organization? So when in saying, where should we be, at that point, what we're saying is we want to develop a vision and mission statement, the vision of where we want to be and how we want to get there, how we want to be recognized, what is different about us. This is the mission. What is my mission? If you look at in religious terms, you have missionaries and you have missionary religious orders. And these different, for example, if most of you know Mother Teresa of Calcutta, and her missionary, she has her sisters and brothers. They are missionaries of charity, religious brothers, sisters, and priests. And their mission is very, very clear. It is to give charity, the love of God, to the poor, the poorest of the poor. That is their mission. You have other religious orders that exist. We have the local ones. For us here, we have the Banya Teresa, who are into education, and so many other things. You have the Brothers of Christian Instruction, and you really see they're the ones who have established universities, they have established schools. Some of the best schools that we know of are Brothers of Christian Instruction. So that's a mission. There's something, what is your mission as an organization? What is leading you? So the vision shows you where you want to go, and mission is how you're going to do it, your specific mission as an organization. Now, why is this important for us in ICT? Because ICT is a strategic enabler. So for ICT to be able to support these missions, ICT must know what the organizational strategy is and then develop its own ICT strategy that is aligned to the organizational strategy. So in developing this mission and mission statements, an organization begins with an external audit. Yeah, let me just get a pointer here. An organization begins with an external audit. This external audit looks at opportunities and threats that exist in the external environment in which your organization or institution exists, the industry in which it exists. What opportunities are there that you can take advantage of to get where you want to go? Then what threats could come in and how can we mitigate them? Then we have an internal audit. So internally, we are looking at ourselves. The organization looks at itself. What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? Weaknesses, specifically, you identify them, both the strengths and weaknesses. You identify them for the sake of seeing of what is it that is going to enable me to attain my vision and mission. And weaknesses, what will hinder me? So you already know, you've examined yourself. Then you develop what I refer to as long-term objectives. Long-term objectives are periodic, so they could be 5 years or something like that. So the objectives, you say in 5 years' time, we should have achieved A, B, C, D. So objectives are things that should be achievable. Now, in line with that, you develop strategies which will support the achievement or attainment of these long-term objectives. Okay? Now, these objectives can be evaluated. They're supposed to be evaluated in shorter term. So these strategies, you should be able, let's say if your long-term objectives are 5 years, so you say every year, I should be able to evaluate these strategies which are there to help me achieve the long-term goals. How far have I reached? How near am I to that long-term goal because of this strategy? Is it working? Is it not working? Why is it not working? So there is short-term evaluation. So you establish that as you establish this. Then you implement the strategies. One of the things we're going to also look at is change management within strategy development. Because when you're implementing strategies, you're basically changing business processes, the way people are doing things. In some cases, you may even change personnel. So this can come with resistance. So change management is key. So the strategies in implementing them, these are done, it's not done by just one department, it's done by everyone, and top management must be involved. Now, in implementing the strategies, we're implementing them in all the different departments. Now, later on, especially also when we look at ICT strategy, you realize ICT strategy is cross-cutting. So each and every department, there must be implementation. You must have change agents and so on and so forth to ensure that these strategies are actually being developed, are actually being implemented, and they are being adopted. Now, we've talked about evaluation. Evaluation is ongoing and throughout, but there must be a major evaluation where you measure performance. And this, and along the way as you evaluate, it goes back to, it's always making reference back to your vision and mission statement. So even if you have these long-term goals, which are maybe set for 5 years, you don't wait at the end of the 5 years. You can decide to have a periodic short-term evaluations, which could be yearly, within each year before you reach the 5 years, to mitigate anything that may be causing any upheaval. So that's just in summary of what we did. Let me see if there's a question. Okay, Mr. Rod sent in his apologies. Not able to connect. Okay, that is fine. So in a nutshell, that's what we discussed. In summary, what we discussed last week. The slides are there on Moodle. So you can have a look at them. Do we have any question before I proceed?
No, doctor.
So let's move on to benchmarking. So benchmarking is a key point in strategy management. So keep in note that we're talking about now strategy management as a generic thing. Eh? So in the organizations where you are, you may find that there is, you have witnessed strategic management at overall organizational level. So we're first starting at overall organizational level. Then we shall translate this down to ICT strategic management. So we begin with benchmarking. We want to be able at the end of this course to, of course, understand what benchmarking is, how we can approach it. Because even in ICT management, you will do benchmarking, that is for sure. There are certain standards that usually help one as they're carrying out benchmarking. So we'll have a look at just a few of those. and you can go ahead and look for more. The student should be able to initiate a benchmarking project. Now, of course, this is key. When we started this module, one of the things we emphasized is that you're now transitioning from an ICT technician or just profession, but you're becoming an ICT manager. So this should be something that is part and parcel of your portfolio that you can initiate and run through a benchmarking project. You should be able to engage the project and adopt standards required for such a project. Evaluation is also key in benchmarking. Then you should be able to critically evaluate the process of benchmarking based on the set standards. So if we're to look at benchmarking in general, what is it? One of the things that it is popular, it is something that is widespread. There is no organization, no institution, no sector that does not carry out benchmarking. So it is a very common practice in all organizations, not most, in all organizations. Now, even for something as simple, I remember here on the farm here, when we wanted to do coffee farming, we went and benchmarked. Remember, my late uncle took us to a family friend who has done coffee farming for some time, and he took us through it, the planting, the processing, the selling, and so on and so forth, and the do's and don'ts, where to gain from government, where you may not gain anything, and so on and so forth. So it's something as simple as agriculture. It's something that you see exists. So what is benchmarking? The concept of benchmarking itself. So it goes hand in hand with strategic management. Where in strategic management you would have looked at where am I now and where do I want to go, which is basically talking about performance. It's talking about performance. What is our performance level? Are we happy with it? Even if you may be happy with it, the other important thing about strategy is not to be comfortable where you are. Why? Because things change, okay? Things change. The way someone you get stuck in doing something the same way, and yet the world around you is changing. And when the world around you changes and you don't change with it, you become obsolete, you become unnecessary, yeah, over time. So it's important that you don't only consider it when you're comfortable, even when you don't only consider it when you're uncomfortable. At any given time is in business, one must never be comfortable about what they are doing. Look at your performance, and then say, even if you're happy with it, say, okay, how much growth can I do? Do I want to change it, and where do I want to go? Now, in benchmarking, you're not just looking at yourselves. Rather, unlike strategy, where we look at the external environment simply for opportunities and threats, in benchmarking, we want to look at how others are performing, others especially in our field. How are others performing? And so, who are the other players in the industry? And we don't just look for any player, we want those who are carrying out best practices, especially with where we want to go, with the growth that we want to achieve. Who are those who are performing best practices? Now, sometimes there may be someone who may not be in your sector, who is in another sector, but on a particular concept, they are really good at it. Now, take, for example, ICT. If one is doing benchmarking in ICT, in another organization which you may not be in your sector, may be doing so well, so let me benchmark with them. So, but basically, we're looking at somebody who is performing at best practice level, and we go there to learn from them. Now, the objective of benchmarking is not to copy and paste. No, it's to see what they are doing well and how can I creatively adopt. Creatively adopt means I want to adopt this thing according to me, according to my organization, according to our mission as an organization, according to our size. Let's even put it at that. So imagine, like Uganda Matters University decides to go and benchmark with Makerere on research. Now we can also, while we are in the same sector, Makerere is a very, very mature institution, not just in aid, but also in research. So if Umo said, I'm going to copy and paste whatever Makerere is doing, you're biting off more than you can chew. So Umo would have to know who is Umo, what is Umo, yeah? And then from what they have done, maybe to encourage research, the things they've done to encourage research, then looks at Umo and says, okay, how can we encourage researchers, people who are potential researchers, to incentivize them. We cannot do what Makerere does, but how can we give incentives for those in Umo that they can be encouraged, they can be given space, but you adopt it. The incentives may not be the same as Makerere, but you realize you need to give incentives. So what incentives can Umo provide? So that's what I mean by creative adoption. So you also look at the same thing. You also think the same thing in ICT. But don't worry, we shall come to ICT specific. So our objective at the end of it is a breakthrough of performance. We should be seeing an improvement in performance. Now, interestingly, at this point, I remember in the last lecture, last time I taught this module, we had a student who is in the government, who works for a government agency. And she told us her experience with benchmarking, where in government, they do a lot of benchmarking, produce a document, and that's where it ends, the document itself. So she was asking, what is wrong? What are we doing wrong? Now, I remember I brought back the discussion to performance. What is the reason for us to do this benchmarking? Is it simply to fulfill a requirement, maybe a government directive, ministry directive, say go and benchmark, and you stop it at that? You're the person who is carrying out benchmarking. Your primary objective is to improve performance. If it is simply to fulfill a requirement, then you won't receive the performance breakthrough that you're thinking about. You won't. And I remember this particular student told us that she actually agreed that for permanent secretaries whose interest was performance, you saw that the benchmarking really did produce an improvement in performance. For those who are not, it didn't do anything. So the primary objective of benchmarking is improving performance within your organization locally. The history of benchmarking started with Xerox in 1979. So, and the aim of Xerox at the time was to evaluate itself, identify its strengths and weaknesses. So it is something that has been there for quite a long time, and it's widely spread. So if we look at the definition, it goes back to the issue of performance. When an organization wants to compare its business processes, so what do business processes do? They lead to performance. So that's essentially the core definition of performance. Yes, Stephen, you have a question.
Yes, Doctor, I just wanted to comment something slightly on benchmarking.
Yes, please.
In line with what you just said, that most times benchmarks are done, and all you do is get the report and put it on the shelves. I think it goes back to the teams involved, and what you said earlier on. That benchmarking should not be a copy paste.
Yes.
Okay? So most people, in most cases, will go to. I know most government agencies, especially to do with e-services, go to Europe for benchmarking, and in most cases, you go and you're kind of overwhelmed to a point that if you're not a good team, you won't even find where to start. Okay, you'll find that every service within government is an e-service. And then you ask yourself, where do I start? At the end, people end up not doing anything. So
Yes.
I think in terms of team composition and also setting the objectives, it should be clear that this is learning as opposed to thinking that you're going to transpose what is the other side and bring it here.
Yes.
Otherwise, in most cases, when you visit someone who is at 80% and you're going to start from zero, sometimes you may think it's a waste of time. And this usually comes in at the cost bit. When you benchmark and realize that, say, for example, the requirement to maintain an e-service is, say, 4 billion per year, and your government quarterlies are less than 2 billion in a year to cover the operations of an entire ministry. So I think that's usually a big challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I think Stephen has really brought it home of what benchmarking should really be. Yeah. So who you go to learn from, what you decide to learn from, you don't go there to scare yourself into a corner. You're there, you want real change according to your context, not according to the other person's context. I remember a gentleman who gave us a talk as board members, and he said that at a certain point, even let's say, if it's even said in competition, even within your sector, you need to stop competing with organizations within your sector. Why? Because you don't know what they have. At a certain point, you need to compete with yourself. As much as we look at our competitors, but you have to reach a point where you say, let me look at myself. What do I have? And how can I compete against myself? So thank you, Stephen, for that. So performance should be one of the key things that you should be looking at under your business processes. Then what are the best practices for your industry? What are the practices that you need to have? So that's the other part we look at. So here says benchmarking is basically learning from others. What Stephen just said, learning from others. And when we talk about learning, it's a new knowledge, a change in our attitude, and where we say, oh, this is something that I can actually adopt. I can actually think about a goal that can be part and parcel of but not copying and pasting. So from that learning, we want to see improvements. How we can do something better, faster, cheaper, or in a more innovative manner. Usually we measure these in terms of quality, the business process, the quality that it brings to our service, our product, the time spent, and the costs. But you can also look at other things, even how maybe it can improve your image, or attitudes. The other things can also come in. Let me see, there's something in the chat room. Yes, this is from Andrew, who says benchmarking is really key. To copy best practices from others and relate how we improve. So it's how the university is looking at ICT infrastructure improvement, but the first step is benchmarking. Thank you, Andrew, for that. So why benchmark?
Excuse me, Doctor.
Yes, please.
It was Isaac.
Oh, Isaac, thank you. Sorry, thank you, Isaac, for that contribution. So, why do we benchmark? So more or less, these are things that we have discussed before. Number one, we know there must be improvement in what we're doing. Then also, it's also one of the processes you go through to identify your strengths and weaknesses, and then also those of your competitors, because you're going to see what is happening the other side. You're looking for innovative ideas. You're trying to be innovative. It's one of the processes you go through to help you be innovative. You can be able to tell whether you're falling behind, because this is a key point when you say if you are able to identify if you're falling behind. Why? In this time, one of the big problems, like we say, we may be comfortable with where we are, but you may not realize that the industry is actually growing. It's actually moving forward, and things cannot continue the same way they always continue. So it's one of the ways that helps us, jolts us out of our comfortable position. It inspires managers. Yeah, I remember when we had our board retreat with the local tea factory, we went with management. I remember we went to another tea factory in Ankole. Ankole is a better performing region than ours. And the management and board were really inspired after speaking to the other team in Ankole to see improvements they have made. Of course, we have the same challenges as all in the tea sector, but to see, especially for me, I was really happy when the other factory showed how they had adopted ICT in improving business processes and improving performance and cost cutting. For me in particular, I was very happy to hear those testimonies from those. So it was quite inspirational. It helps prevent reinventing the wheel. You don't have to go down and start thinking of new business processes, yet someone else can show you how it has already been done. So it essentially drives that much needed change that is required in any organization. Here is an example of a questionnaire. So benchmarking, we shall talk about the processes of benchmarking, but one of the important things an organization must do is go well prepared, because you want to be able to pick the right information for what you need. You don't just want to have a field visit. It's actually picking information that you need. So here is a sample of a questionnaire. Of course, I'm not saying copy and paste this, but you're looking at specific business processes, and you want to learn how, maybe using such a business process, how effective it has been for the other organization. Then the employees' understandings and so on and so forth. It's just a sample. I'm not saying that you should copy and paste this, but it's a sample of how an organization can collect information. So here are some of the basic steps. We're going to go through them one at a time. Like all things, we start with planning, the planning process. Then we go to data gathering. That means we actually are on site. Then after we collect our data, we integrate what we've found. After analysis, of course, data gathering means I've collected the information, I analyze it, then I pick out the changes we need to do as an organization. We then integrate it within our organization, then put it into action, then monitor. And once monitoring can lead us back to planning to see maybe how much more improvement we can do, where we can go elsewhere. So the benchmarking process is also has a lifeline, just like strategy. Planning, what would we do in planning? So it's a team process. For those who have done it, they know it's a team process. Now, within that team, we identify the different individuals we have and the roles that they will play in the benchmarking process. So they're given roles and responsibilities. Then you decide on what you wish to benchmark. So for you to decide on what you wish to benchmark, you would have specifically looked at what it is you feel you need to make changes to. So remember already the process is guided by the strategy management process, which has already given you a guide, a direction on where you want to go. So in where I want to go and the strategies that have been developed, I need to go and benchmark on who with another person who has implemented those strategies. So that gives you a guide on what it is you want to benchmark. You also then identify the processes within that strategy that need to be benchmarked. Then who do you want to benchmark from? You document the current process or lack of it, or the gap where it is. Then you identify the outputs required. You then identify and develop the data collection method. So I showed you an example of a questionnaire. You might even go ahead and say, let's have interviews, something like that. Not just questionnaires, but also maybe interviews or open-ended questionnaires, something like that. Now, this process of benchmarking, the planning process, it is key for top management to be involved. It is key for them to be involved. Why? Because top management is the one which decides which processes they see are lacking. Now, also in strategic management, top management is involved. So the things are integral, they are integrated. The whole process is integrated. So top management is already involved in strategic development. It's also involved in the benchmarking process, the planning process in particular. Here are just a few questions you can use. You can take your time, go through them individually. Reviewing of the planning process, just to make sure that you have most of the basic things necessary. Of course, you can't be perfect, but you can just try and ensure that you have the basic tools to help you carry out an effective benchmarking process. The benchmarking process itself, it's data gathering and analysis. So at this point, you're actually going to you've gone to the organization, or the selected organization, or organizations that.
Excuse me, Doctor.
Yes, please.
Yes, on the part of planning, I wanted to inquire about checklists.
Yes.
Do you have a copy of a checklist? Because for the part of strategy, we never talked about a checklist, and sometimes we get problems when we are benchmarking and doing other processes.
Yeah.
We don't have where to mark. The good thing, if you can go back to the previous slide.
Okay, hold on. Hold on. Is it this slide or this one?
Yes, that one. Reviewing. The good thing, it can act as a checklist.
Yes.
But I wanted to know if you have a formal checklist for such activities like strategy, because we keep on doing them almost every single quarter.
Okay, I don't have one now, but
you have to review strategy, policy, guidelines every single time.
Yeah. Let me get one, identify one during this week, and then upload it on Moodle for you.
Thank you.
Welcome. So the whole purpose, of course, of benchmarking is gap analysis. Yeah. So if you look at this diagram here, you have this graph. You have on one side you have performance, and then time. So now you should have an identification of a former gap, the current gap, and then the future gap. Now, you may not have knowledge of the former gap. Some organization, but like Stephen said, some people do benchmarking over and over again. The organization may have already performed it, and they could have knowledge of the former gap. But what is important is what is currently there. So that is, and you want then to close that gap. Now, the whole point of going to the future gap is to see that our performance is going up. Yeah, that's the whole point. That's why we want to do it. So you collect data and then normalizing it. Normalizing it is basically, okay, it's part of analysis, where you clean up the data and you see your performance levels currently now and where you want to go. For the other organization to see the change, for them to identify the changes that they have seen because of this new business process. I'll give you the example. When we went to visit the factory in Ankole region, and they told us the simple thing they did of implementing these electronic check-ins, where a worker personally checks in to see when it's time to go, when they report to work, the factory workers, where they check in to see the time they've clocked in and the time they've clocked out and the performance they've had. They said at first, of course, workers really resisted them. But over time, when it was persisted, the one thing they said they saw was an improvement in performance. They were able to see personnel performance, where people actually reported to work and do the work. Yeah. For us in the farming industry, you deal with different types of workers. You have the casual laborers, someone who does maybe the simple thing of putting firewood into a burner to dry out processed leaf and things like that. You have another person who is chopping wood. These people can very, very easily dodge work. Very, very easily. They always have one excuse or the other. But at the end of the month, they are available to pick up their salary. Now, what happens with absenteeism? Of course, it affects performance. Look at something as simple as chopping up the firewood to go into the furnace. Firewood at a tea factory is like cement at a construction site. It's like a thirsty water to a thirsty person, to a person in the desert. It must always be there, always. And it must always be ready, the right requirements for that the factory can be operational. But if you have the person or persons responsible for that constantly dodging, it's automatically going to affect the daily performance of the factory. But this organization said when they introduced that, just that small equipment, it greatly improved personnel performance, especially the casual laborers. So just that, looking at the data of the improvement before and after the performance of this business process. Yeah. You identify outstanding practices. Yeah. That's the whole purpose. Analyze the gaps, analyze factors creating the gaps, and communicate the findings and gain acceptance. So the whole point of this, it's also part of supporting change management, because you indicate what your data has provided. You indicate where the gaps are. And for these other guys, when they actually did this, implemented this new business process, the improvement in performance, in overall organizational performance. Then also, it also shows management the whole point of bringing about this performance. So the reason for this analysis is not just for you to know for the benchmarking team to know where the changes are, but to communicate the findings, and in communicating them, you gain acceptance. So again, this is a kind of, these are review questions or a checklist, which one can go through to see that they've gone through this process, that they've actually picked, or they are actually going to select the right data for the department. In doing data collection, it means you have tools you're going to use. Do you have an appropriate data collection tool? the team that is going to carry out analysis, do they have the skills to actually do analysis and pull out what is necessary? Because once you have data is data. It's almost garbage if someone has not made proper meaning out of it. So the team itself must have the skills necessary to analyze and then pull out the necessary information. Okay? Carrying out a gap analysis. So this is also where the analytical skills come in. You want to look for effectiveness, efficiency, and responsiveness. You want to see that the current process we're doing, how effective is it? Where is the gap? The other people who have changed, the ones who have carried out best practices, has there been effectiveness and efficiency? Has that been seen? Again, here I'll give you an example. When we went to previously before going, and of course this now has changed a bit, but in that time, our factory was looking at quality, producing quality tea. Now, some of you who may be following the trends right now, you will see the tea sector is in crisis in Uganda, and the primary reason is quality of our teas, the Ugandan teas. That's why it is in crisis. When the teas are sent to Mombasa, they are compared against Rwanda and Kenyan teas. So that's one of the reasons. So when you go to benchmark, you want to see how is the other company producing quality teas? What are the new processes that they've adopted? In Uganda right now, the Ankole region is slowly pulling out of this crisis. Why? They have made it now a policy that whatever leaf that crosses their gate should be of a specific standard, meaning volumes have greatly reduced, but quality, and you can already see the prices in Mombasa for them changing. So that's already a performance indicator. Yeah, it's already a performance indicator. So you must have a brainstorming session for better performance. So that one is key. Looking at comparing documentation. Now, of course, you hope the other organization is open to comparing documents. Of course, there's some documents which can be shared that may not jeopardize confidentiality. So this is the entire, of course, by the time we're looking at the documentation, we're also seeing where effectiveness came in, where the gap was previously and where they are at now. You should be able to, in analysis, you should have diagrams and from the data you've selected to show the different processes that exist and the performance levels, the different performance levels these provide. So you can go through these different questions and at your own time. They're self-explanatory. So once you have you've communicated that gap analysis and you've identified what needs to be changed, there must be now integration. Okay? There must be integration. So integration has 4 steps. You define stretching targets, which means where you are now and the target you want to reach. That thing that the target from where you are now to where you want to be. The vision of the alternative process. So you have this previous process that was driving you to this target, but you found it lacking at a certain point. Now you say the alternative process is going to be able to do A, B, C, D. I already give you an example of our tea industry, where some factories in Ankole have drastically reduced their volumes but improved quality. And that automatically translates to a better price in Mombasa. Now, consider the barriers to change. Now, for us as a factory, we sit back and say, what are our weaknesses that will fail us in making this change? And with that, we also consider, we then consider the steps we will take to overcome those barriers, because there will definitely be barriers to change. Then plan to implement the changes. So that is integration in a nutshell. This is again another checklist you can go through to see to see that you're carrying out the integration process properly. So first you begin with communication, that have you communicated it and communicated it well. So the data analysis process, data collection and analysis process is key, that you have proper findings, appropriate, not proper, but appropriate findings, and you have carried out a good analysis, picked out the points which indicate the gaps and the new processes that can really help, and then communicate this effectively. These findings, it's not just about communicating them well, but also communicating them to senior management, because their approval is key. You share the documentation with all the departments involved, especially where the changes are going to happen, or anyone who's going to be affected by the changes. It also includes suppliers who may be affected, yeah, and so on and so forth. So these are, you can again go through them in your own time. Action and monitoring. So once we have implemented or integrated the changes, we develop an action plan. Okay, first of all, we develop action plan for implementation. Roll out the changes. Roll out the changes to the different departments and all stakeholders involved. Then you collect data about the progress and evaluate. Yeah. So these ones are quite simple. Sorry. But here are just some. Now, one, you need to have a team to develop an action plan for making these changes. They must document the changes required. Arrange for the sequence of events, the changes that are going to happen. Arrange for them and have timelines. That, for example, if now we are going to change, the mobile is going to change its quality, the first step is inform the client, inform the green leaf suppliers. 2, go and train them. Go physically into the garden and train them. 3, also at the gate. What does the gate process carry out? Those who are receiving the leaf. What quality control measures? And you take them through that. These are the sequence of events. In the factory, how is the leaf going to be handled? So on and so forth. And so you go through these changes. Now, the change management process also is also integrated in this, but that's another topic and one of the sessions that we shall handle. So, these different questions will help you through the action and monitoring part. Do we have any questions so far? If no, let's go to benchmarking methodology. So they're different, like anything, they're different. Yes, please.
Excuse me, doctor.
Yes, please.
I wanted to inquire, how do we select the business processes for benchmarking? Because we have so many in the organization.
Yes, so how do we select the processes? If I just go back to the planning process, this takes part in the planning process. Yeah. You are to identify the process that needs benchmarking. Yeah. Identify the process that needs benchmarking. How do we know which process actually needs benchmarking? Remember, the benchmarking process starts from the strategy management process. In strategy, we identify our vision and mission. Now, in identifying our vision and mission, we're saying this is where I want, this is where I am, and this is where I want to be. Now, in the analysis of that, in that particular analysis, you identify, when you're carrying out, especially the internal environment, what is it that is about me now? What is the weakness about me as an organization that is preventing me from reaching my mission? So in that time, I'm identifying my weaknesses. My weaknesses also includes my business processes, not just my personnel. It includes my business processes. It includes maybe my revenue collection, my capturing a new market. Yeah. So that could be the business process, capturing a new market, revenue collection, management of the revenues collected. So in that time, that's when you identify the business process that actually needs to be benchmarked. Now, in planning itself, in the planning process itself, you have a team. What are the key business processes? The questions you ask, what are the key business processes? So this would have gone hand in hand with the time you're developing your strategy. What are the key business processes that need to be changed, that need to be improved? So this is where you identify what are the functions where improvements are most essential. So Andrew, in this time of planning, this is when you identify which business process needs to be benchmarked. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yes, Doctor, you have answered. I wanted to twist it a bit. I wanted to inquire, for an ICT manager, should I be limited by ICT business processes to focus on, or should I look at the entire organization and bring suggestions for top management?
Okay, now that's a good question. Now, Andrew, let's we are starting first of all with the generic, then moving to ICT. Now, let us bring it down to ICT itself. You would have started with the ICT strategy, yeah? The ICT strategy itself. Now, Andrew, you, as let's say, as the ICT person, when you are developing the ICT strategy, of course, the ICT strategy is slightly different. It has a formula to it as well. You, as the CIO, would have started by looking at the organizational ICT strategy. No, sorry, the organizational strategy itself. It has set out its long-term objectives and its strategies. Now, let us say an organization says one of its strategies is to improve revenue collection. Now, you, Andrew, as the CIO with your team, you would come in and say, as ICT, in terms, what you start, of course, with your mission and vision statement as ICT. You look at your long-term objectives, which are related to, which are in line with the long-term objectives of the organization. Then you look at the strategy which says, or it could be even look at the strategy which says improve revenue collection. Now you come in and say, how can ICT come in to improve this, to support revenue collection? How can ICT? You also set out your strategy. Maybe the strategy is to support the, I don't know which department which collects revenues, accounts department, using maybe the most affordable technologies or something. Maybe using using technologies to support communication and management to see the revenues outstanding, accounts outstanding or things like that, and then giving them support in terms of communication and also helping them with tools. So that would be maybe one of your strategies. Then ICT, now if you're benchmarking, if you identified that, do we have that technology now? ICT would say, do we have that technology now? And if so, or if we're developing this strategy, have we seen how maybe we've had this organization does it so well? ICT has really supported in revenue collection. So I would say my benchmarking, I want to benchmark this process, how ICT itself can come in and support the accounts department, that particular business process of revenue collection. What processes are involved? How are they doing it now? How has ICT come in? And then how can I go benchmark maybe with organizational X? I found out organizational X, the ICT department has really implemented so many things to do A, B, C, D. Then my benchmarking would be going to that organization to see how ICT, not the overall organization, but how ICT itself has come in. Andrew, I don't know if I am clear.
You're clear, Doctor. Thank you.
So let's move on to methodology. Now, in methodology itself, we have several benchmarking methods. And please don't just look at mine. I think also on Moodle, last time I uploaded some documents, look at other methods that demonstrates other methods. So please go ahead and look at what I have up there on Moodle to guide. So there are many methods. There isn't this particular slide or this particular section is not to say this is the end of or be all. There are others and they are quite as good. So we are not limited in that sense. Now, but all methods, all benchmarking methods, one start with identification of the problem area. And I think this is where Andrew's question comes in of how do we identify the process, the business process that we need to benchmark. That's where you identify the problem area. Then the example I gave earlier of specifically for ICT, if you had identified that maybe it was revenue collection, and then you say which other industry has similar processes as us, and which ones have done it well. These are the leaders. Who are the leaders in this area? And then you say, okay, you said this is where then I should be going. This is where I should be seeking the information that I need. So this is where we survey companies for measures and practices. How have they done it? Then you visit the best practice companies to identify those areas of improvement that you need to look at. Then once you've identified those through data analysis, you then implement the improved processes. Now, there are different types of benchmarking. And here we have a list of them. You may want to benchmark a business process. It could be financial, for investor perspective, performance. It really depends. There are several of them. You are basically spoiled for choice depending on which one that you wish which type of benchmarking process you want to look at, or which type you want to focus on. Now, the time itself you spend on benchmarking, these are just estimates, just to give you give you an idea of how much time is spent on each process. You will note that the ones that takes the longest time is data collection and implementation. Those take the longest periods of time. The shortest is creating the team and communicating. Creating team, data collection method, and communication. But each step is key. Each step is key. But take note of the time estimates. Why? This is an investment on your part, you who is carrying out the benchmarking process. It is truly an investment, and you and your team and the whole organization need to invest your time, motivation, different resources, not just financial. Different resources must be made available. Yeah. Here, let me just move this to get the title. So this is the business process improvement cycle. And these are just the steps that one goes through in improving the cycle. So there is nothing new so far. It's just this, this cycle simply summarizes what we have been discussing all along. So the first steps, that is the problem identification stage, where we identify where we have the problem and what we want to do. The second step is more or less the planning process, where you look at the current trends, the measures you want to look at, the improvements. The third step is very also part of the planning process that you want to do, and then also actually carrying out the analysis, collecting data. The fourth step is the relevant, the places where you need to make the improvement, and then you implement. Sorry, I've made a mistake. The sixth step, identifying the best practice, it's integrated with these other steps, because this is where you'd be identifying the place which has the best practice. You can research further information, looking at research articles and so on and so forth, implement a best practice approach, review or evaluate, and then takes you back to step one. So this one is simply a summary of what we have discussed before. Now, these are simply the steps that the diagram demonstrates. It's really nothing new about it. We have discussed all of these in detail. And here we have a framework for benchmarking. So it also takes the same steps we've gone through. There's the plan phase. The experimentation phase this is where you start. You may start at you have collected your data. Even after planning, you've developed your questionnaires, whatever it is. You first go through them. You can decide to just test them out and see how they work. Go into the field, collect your data, carry out data analysis. You can even do an experiment to see if I improve this, if I change ABCD, how does that make any change? You then come to the improvement phase. This is where we actually communicate, we write down, we document what we've done, communicate it to all the necessary stakeholders, and then once we've done that, we implement, which is recalibrate, or rather implement, evaluate, and then come back to the plan phase to see if the goals we decided to focus on have actually been achieved. Here are just some questions for discussion you can go through for yourselves. just within yourselves, and can put up I'll put up a Moodle discussion to help us go through this. Explain how an organization developing IT strategy may benefit from benchmarking. What are critical success factors in benchmarking? Why is it important to understand internal process before studying those of other organizations? Why? Because when I look at myself internally, I don't just want to go copy and paste, but let me understand myself. What is it about me that needs to be changed? What tools are useful in studying the internal process? Have a brainstorm on that. They identify at least 3 types of benchmarking, and so on and so forth. You can look at this. The questions are already up on Moodle. So I'll just put up a discussion forum so that we can have a discussion on this. Do you have any questions so far, or for the whole lecture? Yes, Isaac.
Thank you, Doctor. Actually, mine is not a question, but then I've picked something very important, because at times we've done benchmarking, and it has ended up benefiting us who are in ICT. For example, for the institution I'm working for, we've done a different benchmarks, and but I'm picking something very important, which is about communicating and then gaining acceptance, because for the different scenarios where we've gone and benchmarked, and we've ended up not benefiting the institution, because management has not accepted that it is having such challenges. So we identify such things as people in IT, and so we try and see the best practices somewhere else, how they are carrying out their activities, how their ICT infrastructure is working, and then on coming back to maybe see how we can integrate such things in our settings as an institution. We end up at times maybe getting opposition from those people who are in management. They give us issues like budget constraints, and then it ends up just staying in we as people who are in ICT offices. So you end up knowing much. Your capacity is built because you've copied some best practices elsewhere, but management is not willing to put whatever you're telling them into consideration. Maybe I pick something very important is about communicating, and then letting whoever is responsible to accept that we have such and such a gap, and we need to see how we can bridge this gap, or we can solve this gap, and then
Yes.
go in benchmarking, and then after I communicate the findings. So I find that very important. Maybe it has been missing, and
Yeah.
so I take it. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you so much, Isaac. And I think another important point to note is that this benchmarking process lies on the ICT side. On the ICT side, the benchmarking process would have started with the development of the ICT strategy, which ICT strategy is aligned to the overall organizational strategy. Now, once management, which would have been involved in the development of the ICT strategy, once they know that all that ICT is doing is simply to support this overall objective of ours to move from point A to point B, then once that is clearly communicated, they should be able then to come in and provide the support that is necessary. Okay? So do we have any other question or comment? Do we have any other question or comment?
Thank you, Doctor, for this particular lecture, because it was eye-opening. We have done so many benchmarkings, and most of them haven't been considered. Like after finding your reports, filing whatever you have found, it's not considered by top management. But as Isaac has said, as ICT, for us we learn and we try to improve every single time. So it's a very good opportunity to learn these processes you have shown us. Because some were missing, like we're doing the benchmarking, but the documentation, that's why I was asking about the checklist. The documentation of the whole process, we didn't follow most of the steps. Maybe you can say those are some of the reasons why they didn't consider, because we didn't have enough background to back up the report. But according to our findings, we felt that we had done enough. So sometimes the question comes back to us, ICT, that have we done enough to convince top management to pick up the gaps we have seen and to try to improve them? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So I appreciate the feedback and to see that it is of benefit. Let's hope that all the other subsequent lectures continue in the same line. Note that there's a case study on Moodle. Kindly take time to read through it. This is going to be a basis for our group assignments. And Andrew, if possible, if you can pass to me your groups in time so that I put them in the module so that we're ready for any assignment. If you could do that possibly during this week, I'll appreciate it.
What type of groups? Because we are 5 members.
5 members. Oh. So just 5. Okay.
Yes, we're just 5.
Okay.
The rest were of second year for the other time.
Okay. Okay, then no problem. That will be then one group then. Or should we make it 3 and 2? Just for the sake of, I don't know, would it be, no, let's just make it one group because the 5 is already, let's make it one group. Okay, thank you. Okay, then I think I'll wish you all a good weekend. And let's meet, we can meet online or through the focus group discussion, then also next Saturday.
Okay, doctor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.